Oh, I'm so excited. So excited to be here at Diversitech. First time ever. Thank you all so much for the warm welcome and having us join you here. And also thank you for the warm, welcoming introduction to each of us. We've got quite the conversation that's set up for you all here. I've got some questions that are lined up that I'm planning to ask, of course, but we might riff a little bit, you know, like based off of what my panelists say, we'll see what happens. I might ask different questions, might take us for a curveball, we'll see, because we got a great panel that's here. All right, fantastic. So let's begin. As mentioned, I run go-to-market enablement at a company called Movable Inc. It's a marketing company. And we've got some amazing panelists that are here to share their thoughts, their experiences, and really get us going here. And hopefully you're able to take away a lot from this conversation. But to get us started, Kiandra, you're here right next to me, closest to me, my fellow Brooklyn native.
Shout out to Brooklyn.
See, I knew the shout out to Brooklyn was coming, although I'm from Harlem, so I'm always going to represent that regardless.
Shout out to Brooklyn.
Okay, we're just gonna leave that there. We'll make it a side conversation later. But Kiandra, I got my first question here for you, and I think it's important that we break into all of your experience here, and everyone will get a chance to do this, right? Especially because we all have unique roles at our companies. So I'd love if you could take a moment to share a bit about what you do and what your journey was like entering enterprise sales.
Yeah, for sure. So right now I'm on the Uber shuttle team, which is a new product that Uber is launching within the US and Canada. Had a significant amount of success globally in the India market, in the Egyptian, so the EMEA region, I guess is the shorter way to say that. And so we wanted to launch that here. And what my role is A, working with our partners, fleet operators, to ensure that we're able to service our customers, but then also understanding the needs of our global strategic accounts and enterprise accounts, and seeing how we can change the way people move from high capacity vehicles. As far as my journey, it is a wild loop. So I went to school for accounting. I wanted to open a FUBU financial literacy firm, so for us, by us. Thought I was going to go to law school, took the LSAT, wanted to be a lawyer, tax law specifically, and then decided I do not have $250,000 in loans to take out. So during the pandemic, when I thought we were all going to die, I decided to apply for a sales role at PayPal at the time. And I started there with small and medium businesses, and since then have worked my way up to enterprise accounts at PayPal, at AWS, in Bloomberg, and then most recently now at Uber.
Oh, fantastic, Kiandra. I think that's great. It's interesting to hear what actually made you decide to pivot, because them loans be crazy, right?
The loans be loaning.
Yeah, them loans be loaning.
I'm waiting, Joe. I'm waiting for my email.
Yeah, exactly. I feel that. But what made you decide to choose sales? I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that, because sales is such an interesting entry into the world of tech, and a lot of us made that jump. All of us, in some way, shape, or form, decided to jump into sales. So I'm curious to hear your perspective of what made you choose sales.
I saw the cars in the parking lot. So the salespeople were making significantly more than I was making. And I was a senior. I had my own team. I had people under me, and the sales team was making double, triple what I was making. I said, now, hold on now. And I started to think about high school. I worked at Macy's in high school and Bath and Body Works in the sales department. So I said, if I could sell shoes, surely I can sell software. Not exactly the proper reasoning, but I figured it out. And I also thought that I wanted to get into tech. But I think there's this misconception that in order to be in tech, you have to have a technical role. And I was like, well, I'm not going back to school for engineering. I definitely have always done bad in science, so I'm probably not going to do well doing something like data science, although it has nothing to do with biology. And so I said, well, what's the way that I can pivot quickly and most efficiently while leveraging my existing skills versus like going back to school to figure something else out?
I love that. So you picked sales, and shout out to biology. I majored in biology as well. Yeah, so I'm all about it. There's so many different ways to enter into the world of sales, and it can actually help you pivot and take different steps into different places, right? So Ty, I'm going to come over to you, because I'm really interested to understand, actually for you to first share what it is that you do, because channel sales is unique, and not a lot of people are up on channel sales, right? So tell us a little bit about what channel sales is and how your entry into sales took you into this journey that you're on now.
Yeah, absolutely. So channel sales, for those that may not have heard of it, it's basically an industry where instead of working for a traditional tech job, like selling technical software and products, you're actually in partnership with any company you could think of, any tech company, and you're essentially helping them find customers. So you're getting paid almost like a referral fee, usually at a percentage rate, whether it's 10%, 15%, 20%, to help businesses find the particular software, telecommunications product, cybersecurity product that they need. And you're doing this independently under your own company. And then on the corporate side of it, each one of these companies, whether we're talking about Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Comcast, they have people that manage these relationships. So basically, their job is to essentially manage the partners that are in this program, whether they call this a referral program or an affiliate marketing program. But that's essentially what the channel is. It's people that resell, refer, and then there's the people that manage the relationships on the corporate side as well. And how I got into it is I was actually one of those people that so I originally started just in sales, just doing call center work. So I was a call center salesperson. I was the person when you call in for the internet company and you're trying to place an order for your service. I was the person that took that call and helped you get residential internet. I beat a bunch of salespeople. I was in a call center of like 200 plus people. I was number one out of everyone, and I got an opportunity to do management. And from there, I kind of pivoted into like this whole vendor management world where I was working with all these different cellular vendors that were out there. And I guess throughout that process, I started realizing that there was a lot more to this whole like vendor management side, and that's where I kind of accidentally encountered the corporate side and started finding people that were selling internet to hotels and casinos and hospitals, and I heard about some of the money they were making, got into the management side on that piece of it, and then I've recently pivoted just to be a partner myself. So now I am one of those people that can sell whatever I want to any business anywhere, including this facility if I knew the right contact person here. So.
I love that pivot, right? Like, so it sounds like you started first in the call center selling something very specific, right? Like working for that particular company, having to sell their way, and now you've pivoted into selling whatever you want the way that you want, which is really important. And I'm curious for you because I think a challenge that a lot of people have when they come into sales is understanding how to be passionate and sell well something that maybe they didn't build, right? Maybe something they had to learn about first and start to understand. And that's really difficult to do. And you mentioned that like you beat out all the other salespeople, right? You were a top salesperson, which is great. And I'm curious to hear from you, like how did you work towards that? How did you focus? How did you build your own sales skills, especially when you started at a call center job, which is a great place to start to build your sales skills?
Yeah, I think the big thing is to have an accountability partner. So my wife is actually in sales as well, and we actually were competing against each other. So it definitely helps whether it's your spouse or whether it's just a friend or a coworker, just someone that can keep you accountable. In the same way, like with working out, like you got to have someone that's going to make sure that you're doing all the right steps, whether it's practicing your sales pitch, making sure that you're organized and you know who you're going to contact, what you're going to say, making sure that you understand your product. They have someone to practice with. Most of these products, I mean, a lot of people want to sell tech because it's viral. Everyone's talking about it. Podcasters are talking about it. But the product itself is not really an interesting product. I mean, you're selling a piece of software that you probably don't know who the CEO is or never met the founder of it, but you have to kind of get excited about it. So the only way to really do that is to have an accountability partner that's going to keep you accountable for when you don't feel like doing the work of learning of how to sell and position that product.
I love that, an accountability partner, right? Like it's just that very similar to that coach-mentor relationship as well. When you have an accountability partner, it's someone that can help push you because let's be real, you're not going to stay motivated all the time, right? Sometimes you're going to need someone that you can bounce ideas off of and can kind of help you through it all. So that's fantastic to hear, and also great to hear that your partner's also in sales, right? Makes it easy.
Yeah.
And Shiqueen, like I got to go to you now because we've been talking about sales here, and at Microsoft, such a huge corporation, there's many different ways that you can break into sales. So I'm curious to first get an understanding of what it is that you do to educate all of us in the audience, but also how is what you do very unique in regards to typically how we look at sales?
No, I love that question. I'm happy that Ty mentioned like software being just a thing, and then you have to make it interesting. Because I think, hopefully, what I'm about to say that gives some breadth to that. But I sit in a department called Technology for Fundamental Rights within Microsoft, and we focus on protecting the rights of individuals, society, and responsible use of technology. And then within that team, I manage our national portfolio of work, which is under our racial equity initiative, actually. So most of our partnerships from where I sit tend to be within advocacy groups, nonprofits, government actors, but I also work with our vendors and our enterprise community as well to be able to get the useful technology for use cases that make sense for that audience, and also a way to partners that are familiar with how to speak to a non-technical space. So I spent a lot of my time being a liaison between the two worlds, and my background, actually, I don't have a technical background. I mainly focused in my life in government and nonprofit space, and also freelancing in fashion and entertainment. But I think the through line for that is I tend to really love places where I can take complex issues and try to create a unique solution that may not be in the room already, and I think a place like Microsoft and other tech companies really value that sort of asset to come in. Now, I've since then had to basically get a tech degree since being at Microsoft. So I feel like I now can safely say I understand our Microsoft stack. And I've been taking courses and stuff and getting trained up and learning from my peers. But really that having a team with so many different perspectives, I think, is how we're able to drive really unique sales opportunities for the company that maybe they wouldn't have even thought of, or thought that there was an audience that was interested in the technology itself.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that you mentioned is sales teams with different perspectives, right? I think we've all encountered many different perspectives in our careers thus far. And when I think about different perspectives, it also makes me think about the challenges that you might experience in the world that you're in. And this question's for all of you. Feel free and chime in if you'd like to. But I'm curious to understand, or I'm curious if you can share the experiences that you've had that were relatively challenging in the world that you're in, and any anecdotes that you can add regarding those experiences, just to help us, because we may face those challenges in our careers as well.
Is that, you want me to start, or anyone?
Yeah, you feel free.
Okay.
You're welcome to start.
Okay, perfect. So I think definitely a challenge on a day-to-day is thinking about how to make the case that social impact lives within a concept of a business, and like how to actually do that effectively, authentically, but also still meet our bottom line and like what the goals are for the company. That's a conversation I have probably at least every other day in some respects. I think the work, I've been on the team for about 3 years, and so we have enough like interesting examples and a lot of champions on our traditional sales side of the house, accounts management teams that handle a lot of the bigger enterprise, to kind of like stand next to us to say, okay, here's an example of a group that we didn't think was interested in even understanding Azure consumption, or thinking about how AI can make their work more effective and be able to accelerate what they're already doing on the ground. And then through that partnership, we've been able to see opportunities, again, going back to like the untapped market. So I think it's important to just like share with the audience that thinking through what your skill sets that you have, and then the challenges that you're going to come up, how are you uniquely situated? So I know where I sit and how I can contribute to conversations, and I often push my colleagues, but also receive feedback to understand, like, why do they want to sell maybe this specific product, or why does this make sense? Can they give me an example? And how do we work together in order to make sure that the everyday person understands like the why behind the product?
Oh, I love that, the why behind the product, and making sure the everyday person understands that. But something also that you spoke to is you spoke around authenticity as well, right? Like, in making sure that we think about what our experiences are and that we bring our most authentic self in regards to what we're sharing, because no one else has your particular set of experiences, and that's an important thing to remember. So thanks for getting us started there. Ty, Kiandra?
Yeah, I think to that end of authentically showing up, my biggest personal issue has been historically self-advocacy, right? I think that when I got my first big girl, I call it my big girl job because I had the big check, at AWS, they asked me how much I wanted to make. And I gave them a number, and I thought I was, rolling in the dough. And they came back $53,000 over what I asked for. And so to everybody, it's like, oh, well, that's great, girl. No, because I think what that signifies is that I underbid myself significantly, right? And I think a lot of that comes from us being systemically excluded from these spaces, underrepresented when we get in, and then not having colleagues, peers, mentors, champions, sponsors who can advocate for us or maybe give us more information on how we should go about these things when we're the first or only in our families or friend group to do it. So that was difficult. And then, of course, as a black woman, I think I still wear the angry black woman fear internally, right? What you're saying is actually stupid. And I can't say it that way, right? And even if I say it politically correct, there is a chance that it may be that I'm combative, right? Especially when men say something is the right thing, he's a boss, he's a CEO, he's the next leader of the country. You know, when a woman advocates for herself, not always, but I think more generally, she's bossy, she's mean, she's another adjective that I think you guys can figure out, right?
Absolutely.
And so really trying to identify people primarily who look like me or who are really committed to people who look like me to give me that type of guidance on how do I advocate for myself to make sure that I'm not underpaid comparative to my peers who expect to make $250,000 a year, right? Because their dad made $250,000 a year and their mom makes $300,000 a year, right? And how do I make sure that I'm authentically mentioning in these meetings, you know, hey, I think your idea is great. Reed, I don't think it's great. But here's an alternative method that I think we should try. Or, you know, hey, I notice sometimes I'll be on the email thread, I'll have someone who's not responsible for the account, and they'll reach out to that person. Well, that person's my BDR, but he just happens to be a man, right? So making sure that I call out things early and often and advocate for myself, for my career. And I think it's really helped my career trajectory significantly as I've been able to identify those people and just be more fearless in my ask and take up space. The space is there for you to take.
Amen to that, Kiandra. So thank you for sharing that. You know, you made me think about how important it is that we give, especially our black women, like the space to speak up and call things out and encourage it, right? And ask for feedback. That's a good reminder for me as a girl dad to a beautiful black young lady, right? Like I'm constantly thinking about how do I create the space for her to speak up and share her thoughts and not squash the things that she's thinking. So I think that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that as well. And Ty, I want to make sure I give you the chance as well to share.
Yeah, so I think for me, the biggest challenge that I definitely see is really just diversity. I mean, we're talking about it right now. So if you look at just not only the fact of the people that are selling the services on the enterprise level, but think about like what we're actually selling when we're talking about tech. Like if I were to ask around to this room, like raise your hand if you have a black-owned cell phone in your pocket. Raise your hand if you have a black-owned internet company at home. Raise your hand if you have a black-owned laptop. So majority of the tech products that we're selling aren't really owned by us. When we make it to the top, we move up the ladder and we start to go up the ranks. There's a metric right now that CD Insights and Northeastern put out there where they said that less than 1% of all tech companies are black-owned. So what happens there is when you're going out there, and especially when you're independent and you're selling all these different products and services, it really kind of, eventually when you make it up so high, it just kind of kills your inspiration because you almost feel like, you know, you can never get to that point where you're the owner, you're the CEO, because you don't see that. So when you're at the sales level, that frontline level, and you're moving up, you know, it's going to get thinner and thinner and thinner unless there's some change that happens where we now start thinking about maybe we should have our own version of Microsoft or Amazon or et cetera, et cetera. So I think for me, it's just looking at the raw facts of where we're at demographically and just seeing that there really needs to be some just change out there where we can actually have a choice of tech companies that are owned by a diverse group of people that we can actually work for and do tech sales at. And we're not at there right now in 2024, right. But you know, if we continue to keep fighting when it comes to like, you know, investors and founders and just making sure that we have equity across those boards, then maybe we could get there. But I think that's, for me, is the toughest part, is just looking at the future and where we're heading.
Yeah, that's really challenging to do, right? To look at the future and where we're headed and figure out your place in it. Because one of the things that you mentioned is as you continue to look up the corporate ladder, there's less and less of us, right? Especially when we're talking about black women. There's even less of black women that are up there, right? And I think what's important for us to have a quick discussion on is to understand, well, how do we keep that mindset of maybe becoming the representation or finding the representation while we're also looking to break into tech, right? Because it's an interesting dichotomy. We're thinking about getting into tech, which is like an important thing for all of us, right? Because I think you mentioned there's a lot of money in tech. There absolutely is. But we also want to make sure that we are looking for the people that we can learn from that look like us or becoming those people. So what I'd love to hear from all of you is like, how do we do that while also establishing a career in tech?
I think I'll say two things. The first thing is to be ambitious in your ask. I know I'm a first generation American, and my family's thing is, just get in there and do your hard work, and it's all gonna work out, girl.
Sounds familiar.
It's just all gonna work. Just take the job making $1 an hour. You'll make it, I promise. And I think that that and a combination of imposter syndrome, especially when you're looking around and feel like you're the only one, you begin to feel like, am I crazy for asking for an additional $50,000? Am I crazy for asking for an additional $70,000? And I know in interviews people ask you why you want the job, and the sweet answer is, I'm just really passionate about the product, really love what the company's doing. It's an amazing company. But I think the bottom line is I want to get paid. I want to get paid, and I want to get paid well. And I think that if we are honest about the fact that the reason why we're not as far as we'd like to be is because of lack of certain resources, then we'd be more ambitious in our ask for those resources. One of those resources being money, right? So if I have an extra $20,000 in my pocket, does that mean I can donate laptops to girls from East Flatbush, right? That can maybe spark their interest at 12 versus at 25, because I didn't know about sales, or at least the earnings potential until I was 25, right? But girls that are, that other people knew about it from, they were 10. They've seen it in their households. And so once you get more resources, whether that's finding a champion, a sponsor, or more money, then I think you can use those resources to lift as you climb, right? Yeah. And so don't be afraid to ask for it, because you're not just asking for yourself. You're asking for others around you. And then don't be afraid to say hello, right? Like genuinely don't be afraid to say hello. And I mean, say that to everyone. Say that to your peers, network across, as Issa Rae said, network upward. And then also, again, lift as you climb. So look to that new black girl or black man or woman or man or any other color or whatever, any other minority primarily, right? And foster those relationships where you guys have an opportunity to speak candidly and authentically and figure out ways that you can support each other through the journey, and then how you can figure out how you can support those who are coming behind you.
I love that. Lift as you climb is something we absolutely should remember from all of this, right? Because we want to make sure that we are looking to those people who represent what we want, right? And learning from them, but also bringing someone along for the journey. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, Shiqueen and Ty.
Yeah, and I'm happy to add. I'm so happy you brought up access to capital, because it's the first thing that went to my head, especially as I was transitioning out of like the nonprofit and government sector, and that sort of like, you're here to center people, and then thinking about tech as this like separate world, it's very hard for people to kind of see how do your skill sets go to that. But the access to capital, I just want to be honest, like I think most black and brown people, like that's what you're looking for. And so in terms of, at least for me, getting into tech, like that was high on my list. I'm also first generation, like just thinking about how can I continue to use those skills to get me through the door. But to get through the door is hard, like honestly, especially when you don't have on your resume another tech company or for a matter of a private company at that. I mean, so I think it's really important. One thing that I did was go to conferences like this, literally. Anything that is an industry that I'm not yet in, I think the best way to break in is to be there, because when you're closest to the people next to you, they assume you're proximate to whatever they care about as well. And so it's a great way to like swap information, learn, and really listen for key words, because each space, I believe, has like a language and a lingo that they use. And so getting familiar with that is super important, and that you can go to YouTube University for that. You can go to the conferences, call a cousin, a friend, and also just like thinking about your e-board too once you get in. So I have a list of people within the company that I enjoy connecting with. I make sure it's not transactional, and so I think if you're looking to break in, you want to also think about a way to build, again, going back to authentic relationships. So when you make that ask about a position you saw, it doesn't feel like you're now reaching out for this, but more so that you're invested in building with them.
Thank you for that, because you can't underplay relationships. Relationships is such an important factor when we talk about breaking into tech sales specifically. We want to make sure that we are building relationships, and like Shiqueen mentioned, like those relationships shouldn't be transactional. Frankly, you shouldn't be hitting someone up when you need something only, right? Like it's important to actually build relationships with them. So thanks for that. Ty, any thoughts here?
Yeah, so I think, to piggyback off that, when it comes to breaking into tech, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like when you're trying to get into a very, very big name, like let's say a Silicon Valley-based company, and you don't have that company on your resume, it's very, very difficult. So I think the thing to address is that there are a couple loopholes to this that people may not know. Like one of the loopholes is channel sales, which is the industry that I'm in. So if you, let's say, want to work at Amazon or Microsoft, or maybe even just Comcast at an enterprise level, if you can't get there when it comes to applying and maybe you don't have the right things on your resume, you can get into partnership with these companies. Like for example, there's a distributor that you can sign up with, there's about 5 of them, where there's no costs, and you literally just go sign up, register, and you could become instantly a reseller of Comcast, Verizon, T-Mobile, Cisco, Palo Alto Networks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You would do this under your own company, but then you can hit the streets in the same way that you would if you were an account executive. You can go to all your local businesses that are around, find out what internet provider that they have, if they're under contract, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about maybe the other options that are available, maybe a different provider that might be able to save them money. You could do this with their email provider, with all of that, and then start building out basically a portfolio of customers and income, because you'll be getting residual income from all your payments. But now you'll have a company that is selling all of these services. You will now have experience selling Microsoft and Amazon and Comcast and all of that. So if a year or two later, if you want to get out of that world of being independent, you can now walk up to Microsoft and say, hey, I've been selling your products independently, and I have these customers in my portfolio. Maybe I should look into working in one of your higher end enterprise sales jobs. Let's talk about that. And that jumps you over like all the different smaller sales jobs that you would have to do to get to that particular position. So these are some of the loopholes that people take advantage of right now. I see it all the time in the industry of people starting off in channel sales, going to work at Microsoft and Amazon and all these other companies, Cisco, and then leaving and going back to channel sales and then coming back again. So it's like this back and forth play. It's just not talked about a lot, in our circles and within our demographic. But I think there is an opportunity to bring these stories out into all neighborhoods, equally, so people can start doing this from young.
100%. And I think having the conversations is what helps to build that transparency, right? Actually talking about what this looks like from the inside. But also, I do want to highlight, it's important for us to talk about this from the perspective of compensation as well, being very clear about it, because I can't help but think back to, getting offered $53,000 more than you asked for, which is, at first sounds like such a great thing, but what it really makes me realize is that we don't have these conversations enough in our communities, in our homes, in our friend groups, right? So it's important for us to continue to have these conversations, build that transparency for sure. We're down to the last 10 minutes, so I do have two more questions. The next question that I have is once again for all of you, but it might be more for Ty and Kiandra. But Shiqueen, happy to hear you chime in as well, because we've talked a lot about building relationships within our organizations, right? And getting to know, the e-staff and getting to know the people and building relationships with them. But I think what you just alluded to, Ty, is there's an element of getting to know the customer and building relationships with them that can serve us in a really powerful way. So I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on that. How can we do that? How can we build relationships with customers as we're looking to break into tech? Whether it's in an entry-level role or whatever role that we end up taking, how do we build and maintain those relationships?
Okay. I think I have to go back to that authenticity. I think from finance, very buttoned up, very, prim and proper and straight to the point. Also a New York thing probably as well. Yes. And in tech, I think culturally things are a lot more lax. People come to work in jeans and sneakers and their favorite hoodie from their favorite, team. Yeah. And so I think that when you go into building these relationships with your customers, to Shiqueen's point, not being transactional, right? Obviously, we know why we're here, right? We want to build a sale, but how can I build an authentic relationship with you? And so what does that mean? If you see a dog in the background and you like dogs, we can take 5 minutes to talk about dogs. If you notice they have on, the weather, the current football game or basketball game that's going on, find ways to connect with your customers outside of the technology, because the reality is that there are several companies that do the same thing. Yeah. That's just the bottom line. Yeah. You have Azure, you have GCP, you have AWS, you have the smaller ones, the Alibabas, you have them. So it's not, I need you to provide me with a cloud service. I can go anywhere to get that cloud service, but is Kiandra a person that I want to work with long term? Is she someone I want to email on a Thursday when I have a question? Or am I thinking maybe I just won't ask because I don't want to talk to her, right? So really try to understand your customer's personality. There will be some people who actually don't care about dogs and don't want to talk about anything in life. And that's fine too. But when you do have the opportunity, as often as you have the opportunity to have those conversations outside of just the here's what we do, I think selling yourself because you're the person they're going to work with will really go a long way.
Ain't it the truth? Selling yourself is so important. It's so key. And I think part of that, too, is understanding, what is it that you have to bring that makes you unique, that makes you authentic? Really identifying what your own personal mission statement is, because I think that's the key to selling yourself, too, is continuing to follow that gold star and build relationships off of that. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to say one last thing. And to that point about selling yourself, when you think about exit opportunities, if you're not going to be at your company forever, lots of people leave the company to go work for the customer. Yeah. And once you're able to say, hey, I understand your company, I understand your company's inner workings, your tech stack, and by the way, I'm great friends with Bradley, that certainly helps. And so, this is not just about selling the product, it's also about selling yourself and looking for those long-term exit or networking opportunities.
Yeah, selling in relationships, listen, they're synonymous. So I think you and Shiqueen definitely emphasize that point. So, and what other thoughts do y'all have?
Yeah, I would say the other piece to that is also just be the plug to your customer, not necessarily with just the product that you're selling, but ask them questions and understand their business so well that you can help them beyond just that one product. So if they go to you and they're saying, hey, we are trying to get to this particular number next quarter, and et cetera, whatever the case is, you might have another customer that might be a potential fit for something that they need, or you might have gone to a conference where you might have heard of a product or service that they might need, or another salesperson in your network that might have something that might help their business. Because long term, when you're done with this whole sales aspect and sales career and you just want to now just kind of just be independent and just do your own thing, there's going to be customers that you're going to work with that are going to see you as that plug, where they're going to ask you questions of, hey, what company should I use to design my website? What company should I use for my CRM services? They're going to want to know all of these different things, and if you can be that trusted advisor for them, and that's a key word. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, type in trusted advisor on Google. Yeah. It just takes you down an entire rabbit hole. But we're moving to a space where customers are essentially just relying on that one person to provide them with various different types of products and services, or just advice. You might sell one product, but you might be able to just give them advice on all different aspects. Just one personal example. So one of the partners that I used to manage had the relationship with Chipotle. And basically, if you have a product right now, let's say you have a piece of software, you want to go sell it to Chipotle. You know who the CIO is, you use ZoomInfo, you found out who that person is. You won't be able to unless that particular person, that partner that's in Utah, this small IT company of 10 people, basically says, yes, that's a good idea, Chipotle, do it. Because that's how strong their relationship is from a trusted advisor perspective. So.
Trusted advisor is so important there. So I appreciate that you bring that up because we want to make sure that we understand how to be a trusted advisor. It's something I tell my salespeople all the time. So thank you for that, Ty. And Shiqueen, you were going to share as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one point. Going back to language, I'm so happy both my panelists brought up thinking about trust and building relationships. So even the concept customer, right? So that word defined can also mean a member in your community, a person that works for the government, nonprofit organizations. So expanding what that word actually means, but the tools and the how are the same. So in terms of building the rapport, definitely getting to know also who their customers or users are. So for example, at Microsoft, we were trying to build our presence in Atlanta. That was a place where we had some presence, but not necessarily in some of the local orgs, or they didn't even know if we were coming in with true intentions. And so getting to know, okay, who the people of Atlanta, what do they believe in? What do they care about? Taking that back to my team to share, and then also talking with our tech and sales team to say, here's where I'm seeing the gaps. Here's where we could possibly build a strategy that's in collaboration. And so when you're thinking about customer, I think it's a 360 view of thinking about how you can help them, but also, most importantly, how do you, to your point, show up and also sell what you're able to do. And so I just wanted to add that piece of round circle of how we can be expansive for language in order to get to the same goal.
Wow, thank you, Shiqueen. So many great things that we've talked about today, being expansive with our language, right? Getting to understand the different vocabularies that are within different tech companies, and relationships is something that we've talked quite a bit about. Customers and expanding our idea of customers. And in these last 3 minutes, what I'd love for each of you to do is think about maybe what's your key takeaway or anecdote, rather, that you want to share with the audience as they continue to build their sales career in tech, right? Or whether it's sales or sales adjacent. But what is that piece of advice that you would give everyone here?
Center yourself is my advice. Center yourself. And what I mean by that is, you have ambitions, you have goals, and you're very clear on them. Or maybe you're not, but you may have a broader picture of where you want to be in 5 years, in 10 years. And so work backwards from that and put everything around exactly what your goals and ambitions are in the next 5 or 10 years. So I want to be here. Working backwards, that means I need to be in this role at this point. I need to be making this amount of money. I need to be in front of these people, right? And let everything work for you and not just you working for everything. And I think sales will be good for you. A nice little cha-ching.
I love that. Let's get with the cha-ching, y'all. Ty?
I would say for anyone that wants to get into tech sales or wants to sell, you don't have to wait for a company to hire you to start selling. Just start selling. And what I mean by that is you can just go and find a customer, a business that needs a particular product or service, and then from there, just find a way to refer that business to someone that can sell them. And then ask for payment, ask for whatever payment, 5%, 10%, or, you make it up, you negotiate it. But if you start doing that, you will start selling. That is a sales process. You're going to start prospecting. You're going to start doing all the motions, and someone's going to notice, and someone's going to start offering you offers to work at a sales company eventually. Or you'll start making enough money where you won't even need to go down that route. But just start selling. Don't wait for these companies to hire you. Just start doing it.
Amazing. Thank you. Shiqueen?
Yeah, no, love that. I think if you want to get into tech sales, also just understanding the different products that are out there. I'm so happy that, that Ty was on this panel to be able to share the breadth of how you can actually be involved. So I would say that one for sure, and then getting really crisp also. Good thing I'm sitting between both of you, because also agree with what you said. Getting crisp on your why. I think that's super important. There's so many companies, if you do decide to take that route, that you could work in. But what else are you going to do post being within sales, or are you interested in that? Or if you're staying in sales, do you believe in the products, and are there ways that either you think that they could be better, and really bringing that innovation in? So thinking about those two things.
I love that. I love that. So just a quick summary. We just want to make sure that we center ourselves. Just start selling, and remember your why. So thank you so much for having us here to be a part of your panel and having me moderate. I appreciate you all.
Thank you.